Hello there, my good gaffins. It has been a long time. I do apologise from the bottom of my bottom for being away for such a long time. I'm not going to go into a long explanation of why. Those who are the absolute faithful will know that there were quite a few things going on in my life. So, you know, that's the kind of the reason, brief précis. But I'm going to try and come back, if not totally immediately at once, then certainly by degrees. But I thought I kind of wanted to get on with showing off a few harmony-based things, and lo and behold, did not Toon Boom hear my little mental blip and release Harmony 17 upon the land. And I thought this is such a perfect opportunity to just show off some of the things it can do and the new sort of features. I thought, well, why not? Let's snuggle down together and just show off the features together. So I haven't really configured it really at all to my taste. I haven't even put my hotkeys in yet, so I'm going to have to do everything manually. The good thing is with the new version, if you just have a looky-see here, in the preferences section, you now get the opportunity to save your preferences, which for future versions of Harmony, this is going to be an absolute godsend, because every time I had to create my preferences from scratch before or do some elaborate way of saving them and loading them. So this is going to make life a lot easier for this and future versions. So I'm very, very happy about that. A couple of other things that this does. I'll get all the sort of dry stuff out of the way, I think, first. Now, this is something that a lot of people are very happy about. It means you can pass through composites. Anybody, by the way, who has never used Harmony before, just let this wash over you. It doesn't take long before we get to something interesting. But this is quite a nice little thing. It allows you to do something which usually you were doing over and over again without really wanting to sometimes, and this allows you to do it, which is a nice little nod. And I think there are a few other little bits and pieces that are sort of adjusted here and there. I haven't had a really long look at it yet, but I think that's one of the main ones. I think there may be a couple of little additions here to the OpenGL side of things with the cache and stuff. But again, it's all a bit dry. But yes, that's a nice little nod, and certainly being able to save, love that. So I'm just going to cancel this now. And one of the first things that's new is something that we can all relate to. It's the ability to draw very, very smoothly. There's something about the brushes now that feels just that little bit more slick. It feels very, very responsive. And they've upgraded the system of brushes. And they were already spectacularly good anyway. And now they're just that little bit more buttery, which is really nice. You've got, you know, both brushes have the ability to sort of do this lovely smooth sweeping. And there's also, now where did I see it? There was something about the brush, yeah, here. You see, this is a special little section of the toolbar, pen settings. And you have the ability to have different types of stabilization, one of which is pulled string, which reminds me of some technique that they have, you know, I think they have it in Astropad. And if you look at this, you see that little sort of glowing line. It's like it's sort of pulling the line along. And for certain things, that might actually be quite nice because you can sort of predict where you're about to take the line for a walk, to paraphrase Paul Clay. Is it Paul Clay? Anyway. So there we are. And there's, you know, all the various bits and pieces. You can move them around as usual. And you've got the ability here, let me just turn the stabilizer off, to change the pressure feel. And I think default it's just a straight line, but I like to have this kind of curve because then I don't have to keep going into the, where is it? To this, and to adjust the maximum minimum as extreme as I like to have it, because, and do it for all the brushes. That tends to make all the brushes behave in the way I prefer. So that's a nice little feature. How much I'm going to notice this on a daily basis, I don't know. If you're a traditional animator, then you are going to notice this a lot more. If you're a cutout animator, you're probably only going to notice it when you're creating a character, as you would expect. But I can tell that these brushes behave in a lot more predictable way than they did do, and they already were miles better than Adobe Animate anyway. Boo hiss to Adobe Animate, that's what I say. because they are awful. Anyway, let's move on. I shan't get into that debate, but put it this way, I really have gone off Adobe, and I was already kind of off them before, but I'm really off them now. For reasons which, if you don't know, you know, where have you been? Anyway, I've got a couple of other features here with Deformers now, which allow you to select. Before, you only had the ability to select one deformer and hide all the others. And in order to sort of, if you had, say if you had that with a deformer and you had that with a deformer, in order to select both of them, you would have had to have gone like that, or sorry, with like that, and then press this. Obviously, it doesn't have a deformer on at the moment. Whereas now it looks like you can select one and then select the other one and then press that each time. So you can sort of add them piecemeal, which is a nice little feature, because there were times when you think, I just want to add that one piddling little deformer of his nose or something, and now I've got to circle the whole thing. Well, you don't seem to have to do that anymore. In fact, let's just out of curiosity, I want to just try this, because that is the whole point of a visual tutorial, is that you can see these things. So I'm going to call one, I don't know, I'll tell you what, let's make this fun and interesting, if we can. Let's call one, there you are, dog, I'll call it that, dog. Ah, there you go, beautifully rendered. And then I'm going to call another one cat. And, oops. And then I'm just going to call this cat, and there, you see. Oops. There you are. And there you are. You see? That's not the product of diseased mind. And so my psychiatrist says. Anyway, right. What I'm going to do is do the usual thing. I'll tell you what, this would be handy if I could set this to default, because the amount of times I have to do this, it probably is a way actually, but I haven't sorted it out in my own methods yet. Anyway, la 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 la. So let's do it properly. So I've got a peg for each drawing now, so I can't create a keyframe on the actual drawing. I create it on the peg. And I don't care about the pivot points, not really that important. And I'm just going to create I'm going to use this to do the curved deformer, because I discovered this nice little trick. If I use the envelope deformer to do a curve, it means that I can do this. I can move the root around without moving the entire curve. It's just a little trick I discovered. Anyway, you got this very, actually, it's surprisingly good. Anyway, very, very basically animatable thing. I'll do another one for the cat. There you go. So you now got two very bendy characters. I'm just going to extend the exposure here. I reached for my hotkey and then I realised I don't have it yet. So there we go. So now they're over that period of frames. So now the theory goes, let me just turn off all, yeah, there we go. So the theory goes, if I select that, I've got that. But then if I select that separately and I press that, yes! So now I can, if I want to, select one and then another one and press this button, and then it allows me to select multiples. That's extremely useful. It's a subtle little thing. And if you're new to the software, you'll think, what do I care about that? Think about it this way. If you've got a character full of different deformations and bone parts, and as I say, you've got, I don't know, just the nose selected, and then you also want to be able to move his little finger at the same time, before you would have to then go in and say, okay, this is the old way, right? You have that previously selected. In order to select that, you would have thought, oh, I've got to do both and then press it. Not anymore. You just do that and then you do that, and then that allows you to do both. Subtle, but marvellous. Now, what else is there? What other magical things? There's this thing here, which is the bypass problematic nodes thing. Now, I haven't mucked about with this yet, but I don't know what exactly it does. I have a feeling that this is going to be useful if you have a heavy scene with lots of very, very densely designed characters, and it's a way of sort of negating the worst excesses of that. So if you've got a crowd of people all with very elaborate deformed faces and you know, cutters and God knows what, this may allow that to just help you a bit. I won't go into too much detail, but a production that I was involved in last year had issues with that because the characters were very, very elaborate and dense, and they did at times, you know, they weren't, at times they were great to animate, and then at times they were a bit of a pig. So I think things like that, and also we now know what we could have done differently, would help the production. So that's potentially quite useful. Another thing they've got here is guides, which is quite good, because I tried using guides before and I could never really get on with them, whereas this seems really easy. If I press the Add Guide button, you see that appears. Now, this only appears if you're using the transformation node, the transformation tool. When I press that, you can then move it to wherever you want, and then you can actually see that sort of sticking to that line, and that's because I've got this enabled, snap to alignment guides, I think. So that can be potentially quite useful for sort of lining up characters to an imaginary floor and things like that. You notice that that bounding box goes as far as that bit there, that's the reason. And to get rid of these, I discovered you just swipe them out of view and then they disappear entirely. Because I was thinking, how do you delete these things? It's really simple. Add them like that, put them where you want, and then when you want to get... And they stay if you don't see them, but then if you want to get rid of them, you just select them, go, and then they go. So that's a handy little tool, and it's beautifully done. I like that. What else have we got before I get into the more heavy stuff? I might have to consult the old... the thing that they've talked about. I mean, Harmony 16 had some nice little features. For example, this one, where I can manipulate one using keys and the other one updates immediately. I think, yes, you see like that. So they go together. Whereas before, you'd manipulate one and the other one it would take ages for the other one to update. I think that's still the case with things like this. But when you use a master controller, the master controller, if you were to manipulate a master controller here, it would automatically do it here. I shall show you what I mean. Let me create a master controller. Let me just extend that to there. And then let me just collapse those up and create a keyframe there, Wiz. So this is the reason why I want my hotkeys back, because I just don't know where everything is anymore. There we are. I'm going to get rid of this, actually, the stabilizer, because I don't need it, really. There we go. You can see a few more things I use. And what I'm going to do is, just for the purposes of, you know, nonsense, I'm just going to create a series of bizarre poses of this character, right? This is master controller at its most brutally clear and most useless, all right? So it has absolutely no purpose, but it does illustrate how master controllers work and it's really, really simple. They've, since version 15, they created these this set of wizards, basically. These are not master controllers, these are things to create a master controller. And if you don't know what a master controller is, it's essentially a pair of virtual hands which manipulate the character in ways that you predefine, as I've just done here. Once you've put the character to that position, the virtual hands let go, and then you can then move them to wherever you want them to be, manually. So it's not really, it's not like, what's that? It's not like Moho, where you're sort of designing the mechanics of the character. You're literally just saying, these are the poses I would like the computer to put the character in, and once you've done that job, I can then go in and muck about. So it's not as tight, which is a good thing, in a way that you might think it is. Let me explain anyway. So I've got all these poses here. Now what I need to do is go into the node view. Let me just tidy this up a little bit. There we go. Oh, how clear. Let me let me just move those out of the way. There we go. Right, so we've got that. Now, cat in there, dog in there, just like that. Oh. Now, what I need to do is select all the bits that I want the master controller to control. And then I press, in this case, it will be the grid. And in this case, because it's such a simple idea that I'm showing off, I want a preset grid, which will be 2 by 2. It's 4 basic positions, right? Laid out in this way. You can change the dots wherever you want. This represents how your master controller will look. In this case, as I say, it's 4 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And this system here is what's known as a field guide, which years and years ago was used for drawn animators to figure out where things were on the screen. And it was a way for the camera operators to know where the start and stop parts of a zoom were. So it's it's an old-fashioned idea, but it actually has been reused in a useful way in this example. Let me go to frame 1, and if I click that, it'll say, oh, do you want this in frame 1? And you say yes in this case, and it'll turn it green. See? So it means that is now associated with this frame. And it says it's called C. You can call it anything you like. It's frame 1, which is there, and the position is -1, 1, which is basically -1, up 1. That's how it is on the grid. So this is the grid position, that's the frame position, and that's what you're calling it. It can be called absolutely anything. It could be called Edith if you want it to be called. We go to frame 10, I click that one. 20, click that one. 30, click that one. Once you're happy with this, you can save it so you don't have to keep putting in the frame numbers. So if you had a modus operandi where you knew that the character was always going to have its face forward on that one, its face slightly to the side on that one, blah, 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 you could save it and then you wouldn't have to do all this side. You'd just load up your grid with all the predefined positions, names, or whatever you want, and you're good to go, which is very, very useful if you've got a huge amount of characters that essentially have to do the same thing in a master controller style. At the moment, this is just a balloon cat with one eye doing silly things, but it gives you an idea of how the thing works. Now you have a look here, and it's got a collection of all the things that are, at the moment, going to be moved by the master controller eventually. The problem with this is, at the moment, is that it might be moving a lot of things which aren't necessary. At the moment, as far as I can tell, I've moved this part, this part, this part. I haven't moved the artwork underneath, and so therefore there are a few things that I don't want the master controller to control. I only want the bits that have moved in these frames. So what you can do for it to filter the things that are moved and to not control the things that aren't moved, you just press this button and it says there are now 5 things that this master controller will move around. And if you have a look here, this is what it'll be. It's literally the 5 attributes of this curve, and that's it. It's not transforming the entire object. It's not changing its color or doing anything clever. It is literally just saying, I want to move this curve and these 5 attributes of the curve. Yeah. The more complicated it is, the more clear that might be. But just take my word for it that you always want to filter it down. You don't want the master controller to move things you don't want, usually. So when you're happy with that, you create a name for the master controller itself, which will be, in this case, will be Cat Cyclops. There you go. Preferably spelt right, that usually helps. And what it'll do is it'll create this and it'll save it in somewhere called scripts. Because if you know, Harmony files are essentially a collection of files. And then within that collection, it has a place for scripts, a place for palettes, a place for this. It saves this master controller, which is essentially a script in itself in Java, into the scripts folder. And it will be called MC Cat Cyclops within the node view. If I create it, it'll say, where do you want to attach this master controller? And at the moment, it has to go to a root of some kind. It will give you a list of the places it can attach to. In this case, it will be attached here because that's the only option. When I click OK, it'll say, do you want to save it here? You say, yeah. And then it'll save it here. Now this master controller, I can get rid of this now. This master controller is sort of not attached to anything. It's a script. That's all the master controller is. And its presence within the file is all linked up. Now they've sorted out a lot of the loose ends in Harmony 16 as well as 17. So it's a lot easier to produce. In the older version, you had to then link it up to the file. It was all a bit confusing, whatever. Now at the moment, this composite is linked to, sorry, this master controller is linked to this composite. So we've now got this, right? This little weird thing. You notice here, by the way, let me undo that. I move over to a blank frame so I'm not interfering with this animation in case I perhaps wanted these positions. And then if I move this thing, it then moves the character in ways that are exactly the same as the positions I put there. So it's a pretty simple system. And with this, you can do all sorts of magical things. The more complicated you get, you can make a head turn, you can make a mouth move in all sorts of clever ways. Now, one thing I do like about this is, yes, okay, you have to connect it to this composite. That's the way it works. It has to know where it is in the node view world, and that's its sort of anchor. But you don't have to display it. You can, if you want to, display. Oh no, sorry, not display, visibility. If I turn on that and then turn it off, if I get rid of it by doing that and then I select it again, oh no, it is still there. Yeah. I wonder, hang on. Let me try something. If I disconnect it, as far as I know, let me do that again. I don't think it'll work. Oh, it does. Okay, right, fine. I'm still learning things about it. Okay, right, that's interesting. I think the point is I don't want it visible here. Now, let me see. This is me going off the rails a bit, so bear with me. I've been able to make this work some other way. Let me see, display. Bear with me as I do this. There is a logic to this, and I have been able to make it work somewhere else. Double L, please. Thank you very much. Now, because I've created a new display, I have the option of showing a different thing here. And if I now do that, there we go. There we go. You notice now it's got a different display. I'm able to have the master controller here and not here. Yeah, there you are. So essentially I've got a kind of little console to the side. And in the previous versions of Harmony, not 16 but 15, this wouldn't update. It would only update when I let go. And that was a bit of a problem, because if you have a really elaborate master controller set of functions, they can, imagine you've got a series of these little levers and pulleys and things, they're going to get in the way of the other characters a bit. So having them over here in its own little area is fantastic, because you can just happily sort of fiddle about and you're able to move the character without getting in the way of the action. It's great. Another fantastically wonderful feature that Harmony 17 allows is the ability to, if you see what I'm doing here, I'm tapping the keys and now I'm shift tapping, and I'm able to nudge the master controller into different positions. Now imagine you're trying to do a bit of animation with a head turn and you only want to nudge it a little bit. Before, with Harmony 15, it was difficult enough because you would move it a little bit and the thing would jump and it would go to a different position. It was a nightmare. With this, they figured out a lot of the problems and allowed you to sort of gently nudge it into place, getting these lovely smooth micro movements with no effort at all. It's wonderful. So that's really, really useful. Another thing that you can do is you can go into the properties of a master controller node and change, we can change what it's called on the screen. For a start, having a label wasn't allowed in 16. You can now do that. So you can call this mastercon cat if you want. And as far as I know, it doesn't update immediately. You have to hide it and then re-show it again. And you can make the widget colour anything you like, much easier than before. You had to sort of program it before. You can make the label colour anything you like. You can make the background colour anything you like. There you go. I'm sure that'll look gorgeous. And make the text size a bit bigger and the widget size itself a bit bigger. I'll just do a little bit there. Make the font anything you like. And then if I close that and then I hide it and show it again, there you go. So you can imagine that when you've got several of these, the ability to colour code them and do all sorts of things is incredibly useful. I love that. And then you can basically go in and say, okay, I want keyframe there, and then you can do that. If I just go in there, see, you can see I can essentially create a piece of bonkers animation in this way. There we go. With no effort at all. And I can go in there and I can just create a different sort of set of smoothings. Let me see how that'll work and play. Yeah, lovely. Worthy of DreamWorks. So that's an amazing little set of features. Now the other wonderful thing, the thing that just made my heart sing when they released this, is the ability to, if you imagine that as a 2D, well, a 1D structure. So this is a master controller slider, which is perhaps good for a blink or something that doesn't require an awful lot of movement, maybe sort of mouth movements or something like that, but it's just a slider from one position to several others. You've got a grid which allows you to slide around to various other positions, rather like this. This one is kind of like a cube. So not only have you got the ability to slide around this, you've got variants of this one. So the problem that you had previously, the way master controllers work, is you're able to move the head around and their expression was static. So the minute you started manipulating a mouth to be a happy mouth or a sad mouth or whatever, if you were to then say, oh yeah, I just want to move that a little bit, oh, and then the mouth would immediately ping back to the original position and it would be a nightmare. And you would have to get around this through various drawing substitutions and problems like that, and it wasn't the most fun thing to do. Well, with this, you can now create a whole set of head positions for happy, sad, open mouth, closed mouth, whatever, which once you've got the basic structure down, you've got the various positions, you just copy and paste them and make adjustments. So it's not as frighteningly long-winded as possible. It just requires a bit of work, which in a future video, I will go through the whole procedure and make it fun and interesting rather than this sort of load of old nonsense. But the point is that you can now do this. So you can essentially have a head that looks around, blinks, makes funny faces and do all these things at the same time. Now, whether you want to invest that amount of time in a character is debatable. For some projects, it's worth it. For others, I really don't think it is. It'll just get in the way, and there are some times when master controllers are not the correct way of rigging a character because they do require a lot of planning and a lot of work. But for those times where you do want that, that feature is terrifically useful. So I'll show you quickly. You still get the grid here, but then you get this slider thing as well. And yeah. So I don't know why it was doing that bizarreness. I think it was an overhang of a previous session. But you see here, you can create 5 grids with, or 6 or however many you want, all with variants of the same components. I hope that makes sense. I don't really, it would take so long to explain it in any real detail. I'm going to wait for another video to do that. I really want to show off the master controller properly. But as a theory, that's great. You've got now the ability to create a character which is very sophisticated and what we wanted a couple of years ago, to be quite honest. So I'm glad they haven't sat on their laurels and not addressed this issue, because it's a superb feature and it allows you to do some quite breathtaking things, and it's actually reasonably easy to produce, which is quite something to figure that out. So, you know, well, sorry to sound patronising, Toon Boom, but well done, Toon Boom, for that. Yeah, you'd worked it out. Well done. What else am I looking at here? They've got the ability now to motion blur, apparently. Here we are. So that's a new feature, motion blur. Apparently, we didn't have that before. I've yet to figure that out and look into that. All sorts of things. I mean, we had all that previously. We now have the ability to mark a frame as well. Let me have a look at this. So, oops. So if I go here, where is it? Mark frame, and I can make it yellow or whatever. So that's a nice little feature because I can actually move the mark frame around, which for when you're setting up your master controller sort of template, if you like, for a character, the ability to move things around is actually quite useful. And to have more than just the marker that also does. If I want to mark a sort of permanent frame, I can go here, scene markers, mark current frame, make it any colour I like. Boop, boop, call it something. And there it is there. But this ability is also just another level of complexity, which is actually quite useful. And, you know, you might also want to mark a particular picture and say, this is the frame that I want to show, or whatever, you know. Not necessarily as aggressively as that, but this is the frame here, that one, there. You also have a couple of things here on the node view which are a little bit different. If you look at here, you've got cable style straight now, which allows you to do things like that. It's a subtle little thing, but I'm wondering if I'm going to warm to this because it is a lot clearer than the curvy-wurvy stuff. I like the fact that they snap into place and you've got waypoints, but this is actually quite welcome. So I'm quite happy about that, Toon Boom. Yeah, yeah. Other than that, I can't see anything that's majorly different. It's all just about refining and improving. They did introduce something, a couple of, last version, the mini playback toolbar, which should be quite useful. Let me have a look at this. Here we are. Frame rate same as scene, and I want to be able to play, let's say, 16 and no after. And what that allows me to do, if I play it from here, is to only play those frames. Now, the thing that concerns me at the moment is this. Let me try it at 25. There we go. Now, I don't think that the scene... Let me just check that. Scene settings. And it's at 25 frames per second. Now, I think there's a bit of a glitch there because when I said same as scene, it's definitely... Oh, it was. Not now, but it definitely was slower until I did that. And I think that when it was Harmony 16, it didn't have this bit. I'm not sure. Either way, it was a bit glitchy, and they seem to have at least managed to fix that, I think. So that's really useful because as a stop motion animator, I used to want to only play the last few frames, and to be able to do that now, oops, is really something. I really like that. So it's doing the same thing. It's not showing you, but okay. Okay, no, that is correct. Yeah. Yeah. So it's quite nice. I think I can set that to a hotkey as well. Let me just have a quick little look. This is the shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts preferences. And as I said before, you've now got the ability to save them. Thank you, Lord. And the mini playback. Yeah, here we are, mini playback. So what you could do is assign that to a hotkey, and then you can only see the last few frames played back. And if you want to make adjustments, you can go here and say, I only want to see the last 18 frames or the last 2 frames or whatever. It saves you having to keep clicking the frame that you want to play from and then pressing play. So that's quite nice. And you've still got the ability to have this little thing if you want to. Because I have to admit, I really like seeing that sliding along. It's just reassuring. So yeah, that's a little feature from 16, and I think they've made a little improvement there, which is quite nice. Other than that, I can't see anything that's majorly different since 16. Again, it's all refinements, but they are very welcome. And this is another thing that's sort of an overhang from 15 to 16. You now got the ability to select master controllers from here, so you don't have to keep going to the node view and finding wherever they are. You can just look at it from a list and refresh them or select or show them here. It's another little subtle thing, but it's very, very useful. I think that's it. I'm not going to bore you with all of the rest of it. I'm going to do a proper tutorial about how to create a proper master controlled character. And now that 17's around, I can actually do a character with a mouth that changes and stuff. It's a little bit of a semi-epic, so I want to try and make a simple character to do it. I've recently made several characters using master controllers, but they are so elaborate, and I've been figuring out the best way to do it because it is a work method which is quite new, and a lot of companies are still figuring out how to work it out. It's very, very new, and certainly with the new features here, particularly that one, it's made a lot more options, a lot more easy. Oh, there is one other thing. There's one other thing. I remember now. Might as well include it in this video. There is the texture defamation ability. Let me get rid of... Actually, I can do it with the dog. Let me get rid of that defamation, and then let's create a defamation using that. And it's this one now. This is a brand new thing. I've almost forgot it. It's called the Freeform Deformer. And as far as I know, you go click, 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 and then click. There we go. And what you've got here is a deformation that allows you to bend, there we go, to bend the character in this much more gentle, friendly way, and the ability to twist them around as well at any point. And this wasn't really an option before. This was, it would kind of shear the texture and do all sorts of things. This is very, very friendly now. It sort of is a kind of extension of what you could do with constrainers, actually, but a little bit better even than that. It's certainly a lot easier to set up. And this is really great for making textures in particular look as if they are actually rounding a body rather than sort of being cut by something. So, but I'm sure you can probably use it in ways that they're not expecting as well. I mean, this kind of works in a funny sort of a way, not requiring an awful lot of effort, and he's jumping around with his little nose there. It's quite sweet. Little sniff there. So, yeah, I think that's covered most of it. As I say, there are a few other bits and pieces, but those are the main sort of glory ones. Have fun with it, and I will be back with you with a more proper, that's good grammar, isn't it? Proper tutorial very, very, very soon. I want to try and get the momentum going again on these and be with you more because it's fun and I love it. Okay, speak to you soon then. Bye-bye.